What's up, YouTube? I want to do another video in the series of home defense choices. I was going to cover handguns today and the different operating systems of different handguns and what might be right for you, because you have to ultimately make the choice of what you're comfortable with, what you can use proficiently, and I think that's the key here, is what you can shoot well. Doesn't really matter what name's on the side of the gun or whatever. If you can shoot it well and it works, you function test the weapon or the gun, and it works well for you, that's probably the right gun for you. Might not be the right gun for me or your buddy or whatever, but that doesn't matter. It matters what you can shoot well and you're comfortable with. So I want to cover a couple, basically cover the action differences between single action, single double action, and striker fired. And so that way you can kind of see the difference, how they can be safely stored, in what condition for a home defense gun. So I was going to start with a single action, and this is single action only. And if you're unsure what that means, basically it's, I guess the easiest way to explain it is, single action means it's just doing one action when you press the trigger. Basically the hammer's already cocked, and all it has to do is release it when you fire. So it's doing one action, it's just releasing the hammer. This particular model here is a Dan Wesson V-Bob, and you got a 10-round capacity. In some magazines, I think these ship with 9-round magazines. Wilson Combat, Cobra, and Chip McCormick makes some really nice high-end 10-round magazines that work well in 9mm 1911s. So this particular one, or basically a single-action gun, will always have a safety because you have to stop that hammer from falling somehow. So what they do is with a manual safety. So basically, the condition this can sit in on your nightstand is what they call cocked and locked on a 1911. So there's one in the chamber, hammer's back, magazine's full, safety on. And that has to have a safety on, it has to remain on this particular gun, because that's the only safe way of manipulating this gun or storing this gun, or any way to keep the trigger from falling. Because you only got about a 4-pound pull on this. They'll range anywhere from 4 to 6 pounds or so. And it's very minimal movement it takes to activate the trigger. So single action can be stored basically just how you see it, just like this, if it was loaded. Magazine in one, the tube. This particular one doesn't have rails or anything like that, accessories to mount a weapon mounted light. So this would require a handheld light, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's how your system works and how you feel comfortable manipulating it. One thing I would say is you always want to train. Just shooting, and especially with manipulating a light, because it's a whole new element involved, because you lose that hand to basically support the gun that you're used to. So if you're going to run a light on whether it be weapon mounted or whether it be hand mounted, you have to practice with it, because it's a whole new setup of movements, kind of fine motor skills to be used at the time. So it's something you want to be proficient in before something bad happens, before you hear a bump in the night and you do whatever you're going to do, if you're going to go looking for it, or huddle up and lock your door and wait for someone to come. But you do need to be proficient in that. You use it. That's the time you don't want to learn on the fly, right when something's going down. So advantages of single action is, it's safe to be stored without a holster. Although I do recommend having guns on a nightstand in some type of holster, just because you want to have a conscious effort to get the gun out, right? So that means is there's got to be either stored in a drawer, something you have to pull open to get it, in a holster, so the gun has to come out of the holster. Something so you're not half asleep. You have to be completely awake, and aware and conscious or whatever to manipulate that firearm. And it's just a good thing to have just a secondary cover like that or something, so you're not half asleep, kind of asleep and awake, and you pull that and you can have an accidental or negligent discharge at that point. So like I said, pros, it's locked. This one actually has a grip safety as well, so you have to have a firm grip on the firearm before the trigger will actuate. Pluses is a great trigger pull, probably the best trigger pull around, because that's why these guns are still around 100 years later, because that trigger pull is so good. If you get a good one, a reliable one, if it's tested, this thing's had probably 2,500 rounds to it now at this point, maybe a little more. It's been ran through some handgun classes, and I know this thing's 100% rock solid. You feed it good ammo, it's going to perform for you. Run good mags in it. So this thing, I carry it every day. This is my EDC, so it's not a dedicated nightstand gun, but it could be, especially if you're living in a restricted magazine capacity state. You got 10 rounds in this. Fortunately, in California, this isn't on the roster, so even though it is a 10-round gun, you don't lose any capacity due to the restrictions. It's not on the roster to purchase new, so that's kind of a downside. 9mm, I feel is fine for home defense scenarios. At this point, though, size really doesn't matter on a home defense gun. It's not like a carry gun. So you'll see some bigger guns here I'll show you, because at this point there's nothing you're carrying around all day. It's nothing taking up extra space. So really bigger kind of is better if you gain the controllability of it and it's a gun you're proficient with. It's not a downside in a home defense scenario where it would be on an EDC gun. So that's number one. Like I said, that's single action. Just basically dictates that once the safety's off, all that trigger has to do is drop that hammer. So you get an awesome trigger pull. It still is safe, like I said, with the safety, with the grip safety, all that kind of stuff. But that is definitely a plus, is the trigger pull. It is something you have to train with, because the safety does have to come off. That does have to be a conscious effort to remove that safety before this gun will fire. So it's something you still have to train with. None of these guns you can't not train with. I mean, that's you'll see a theme as I go through them. But training is key. Really it's the Indian, not the arrow, is what I'm trying to say at that point. But single action, that's kind of covering that. Like I said, good trigger pull. Safe. It can be sat without a holster on a nightstand if you choose to do that way. It still is technically safe. This gun will not fire just by inadvertently bumping it, grabbing it, whatever. You got safety, you got grip safety. So that's number one, single action. We'll cover double action, single action guns. This particular gun is an HK P30, and grip wise, this thing's awesome. This thing is like putting on a glove when you grab it. All of the kind of newer style HKs like this, like the VP9s, and I think the later model 45s that have the this particular style grip is really comfortable. This is a single action, double action gun. Now what that means is basically when it's chambered, it's in single action. So it's just like the 1911 as far as all you have to do is one action. When you pull this trigger, all it's got to do is dump that hammer. So then you got double action, which the problem I see a lot of times guys train with like SIGs and HKs, CZs, single action, double action guns, is they go to the range, they'll pop a magazine, they'll load it, and this is how they shoot it. Bang, 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 because it's easier. Because like I said, all you're doing is taking up the slack there, and then you got about a 6-pound break on this gun, a little bit of creep. HK, kind of the downside of them is triggers. Triggers aren't the best, but they are really reliable guns. They're real robust built guns. But what you really have to practice on is that double action trigger. Because this is probably, I didn't scale it, but I would imagine it's all of 13, 14 pounds to get this thing back and to drop the hammer. So that's double action. You're doing two actions. You're pulling the trigger, it's cocking the hammer, and then it's releasing the hammer. So that's where you get that extra poundage from. But that's a safety feature because this does not have an external safety. There is models that you can get with an external safety, and I'll show you a different variant of an HK, show you what I'm talking about on that. But basically, the safe way to store this in a defensive or a home defense scenario would be decocked in double action. You could holster this, or technically you could leave it out of a holster just because it's going to take 12 to 14 pounds, whatever this trigger is, amount of force to deliberately fire that gun. So that's a lot of force to go off. It's not something you're just going to kind of bump into on the nightstand and it's going to go off. It's not like it's in single action. So once again, you have to train. You have to train quite a bit on a single action, double action gun because the first pull is so much different than the following pulls. So what I mean by that is you're going to pull 14 pounds, bang, it's going to go off. Hammer's going to cycle right. Now you see the hammer stay back. Now it's in single action. So when I release this trigger, it's going to come back. And this has a fairly long reset. It's going to reset there. You're going to hear it and feel it. Now you're going to come back and take up the slack, right? There's not much weight on that right there. You're going to come to a wall, and then you're going to have about 6 pounds or so and just a little bit of creep to set that off. So what happens is people want to train easy, right? They want to go shoot where their groups look better. They're going to just load this gun up and fire at the range. Bang, bang, bang. Single action. That's not how you need to train with a single action, double action gun for serious use. I mean, it's fun if you want to go punch targets and stuff, whatever. But if you're going to implement this in any kind of defense system, it has to be carried in double action. It has to be set on the nightstand double action. It's not safe to sit this gun out like that. Even holstered, I wouldn't recommend it because there's no safety on it. No way of keeping just touching that trigger from getting that hammer to fire. So, I mean, that would be at your own risk if you're going to like keep it in single action in a holster. I highly wouldn't recommend that. This gun's designed to be carried double action and then go into single action after you fire it. So it's going to take some more training time, I think, than the other systems, just because you're basically learning 2 trigger pulls. Bang, bang. You know, so you can see just the speed of my finger how much easier it is to pull in single action than it is in double action. This one you'll see has a particular one has a weapons light on it. This is the TLR2. It's got the laser built in on it. I'm not a particular fan of lasers. This buddy was just wanting to get rid of this and gave me a really smoking deal on it, so I bought it. But the laser can be turned off, so you can go laser only, you can go light only, or you can go laser and light combo. Maybe pick that up, but that's too, you know, in a home defense scenario, it not necessarily is a bad thing to have, you know, a light and a laser together, as long as it's zeroed. But I'm just particularly not a big fan of lasers in general. I don't train with them, so I'm not real proficient with them. This particular one has a European style or HK style paddle release, so that's another thing that's different than the other ones you'll see here, the manual arms. Inject that magazine. Basically, it's easiest to do it with your trigger finger, I find. It can be swiped with the thumb. It just takes a little bit of reach. But that's just, again, knowing your system, knowing the gun you choose and how to operate it. So this one, like I said, is got a weapons mounted light. Another thing, like I said, you got to train, you know, with it. It's got a momentary on one way, and it's got a, it locks on the other way. So it's just something that, like I said, that you need to take the range with you and try it out. You know, try activating the light. You know, if you momentary it, you can't pull the trigger obviously at the same time unless you momentary it with your support hand. So that's something, you know, like I said, like a recurring theme. You need to train with it. Handguns, unfortunately, are hard to hit with, especially in a stressful scenario. And if you don't train with them, your hit probability is going to go way down. I mean, if you look at a lot of law enforcement shootings, you know, a lot of times they'll expel, you know, 12, 14 rounds and score 2 or 3 hits. So under stress, not to say that law enforcement training is the end all be all, because it's not. It's kind of the bare minimum just to get you out there and get them to sign off their liabilities to say they trained you. But you need to be proficient. Like I said, especially with a handgun, they're hard because, you know, just a little bit of angle change is going to miss the target, right? Where a long gun, you know, you see that barrel way out there. So, you know, an angle change isn't as great as it is here because it multiplies the shorter your barrel length is. So, you know, it's easy to get off, or when you're pulling the trigger, you know, jerk it, do whatever, get off target. So, you know, I wouldn't consider a handgun a #1 choice for home defense, but they're definitely doable. You just got to train with them. They do have a lot of pros as far as being short, you know, being able to keep them close to the body, easy to manipulate around corners, that kind of stuff. So they do have their positives. You know, their stopping power is obviously a lot lower, regardless of caliber, than a shotgun, you know, or a carbine, you know, rifle carbine or whatever. Stopping power is not near as great. And even stopping power is kind of almost an outdated term now. But just the energy that comes out of a 9mm or a 45 isn't nothing like a 12-gauge shotgun. So, you know, just consider that when deciding on a weapon system or whatever for home defense. So that covers one single action, double action. I'll show you another one that has a little bit different spin on single action, double action. And this particular model is actually an HK as well. This is an HK USP in 9mm. This particular one has a safety and a decocker. So what that means is it's safe to carry double action, or, you know, sit on the nightstand in double action. It's also safe to carry it just like the 1911, what they call cocked and locked. Now I have a safety on, it's single action. So, you know, the trigger won't go off this point, won't drop the hammer. Once again, though, it's a training issue that you got to remember to pull that safety off, you know, in order for it to actuate. So if you can, there's 2 ways to train on this gun. You can, like I said, carry it or store it cocked and locked. All I have to do is safety come off, pull the trigger, or double action, you know, same thing. This one's This one's the same deal. It's a gritty kind of 12 to 14 pound pull to get to actuate and double action. So you fire your first round, it's going to be in single action. Come out, this once again has a little shorter reset than the P30 does, but it's still not great. You got that gap there, and then you squeeze off your single action round. So when you're firing fast, you got to train that, and then you got to train that. So once again, you're learning 2 trigger pulls, or like I said, you can even run it safe double action. Same thing, you got to remember to turn the safety off and have that first, real heavy trigger pull that'll then transition into a light trigger pull. So another thing to consider. This is a big framed gun. It's pretty good size, but once again, it's very soft shooting as well. This is probably one of the softest shooting guns I own. So that pays dividends when you're trying to stay on target while you're firing rounds. And once again, size doesn't matter in a home defense gun because you're not carrying this inside the waistband. You're not trying to conceal it from anybody on your person. So don't let size kind of be a factor if you want a little tiny small gun. Your EDC can work, like say if you have a shield that you carry every day. It'll work for a nightstand gun. You can just pull your whole system out, your holster and everything, and place it on your nightstand or wherever you want to store it. That works. It's doable. But if you're going to buy a dedicated home defense gun, don't let that, little gun, I need a little tiny gun or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you're not going to carry it, it doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter. If you're not in a restricted state, for magazine capacity, this one's 15 rounds. The HKP30 is also 15 rounds, so +1 if you top them off, so you can have potential of 16 rounds on both these guns. That's quite a bit of firepower on a nightstand gun. So for a home defense scenario, you can also keep spare magazines on the nightstand as well or whatever. But if you're limited, this in a limited state, this is a 10-round gun. That's a 10-round gun, and so is that 1911. So technically, you're losing capacity on a gun this size if you're in a restricted state like California. So that's another factor to think about. If you can only have 10 rounds, what 10 rounds do you want? So what we'll cover now is striker fired guns, which are kind of one of the up and coming probably most popular guns sold now. Is striker fired. This particular one's a Glock 19. This one's a Gen 4. Same thing now. What happens is what's nice about a striker fired and what's easy to train people on striker fired is it's the same trigger pull every time you squeeze the trigger. So what that means is the first shot, Gen 4, they say 5.5 pounds, but they're not. They're probably about 6.5 pounds. But that pull is the same as that pull, is the same as that pull, same as that pull. It's the same every time. You can also ride the reset on a striker fired, get just a little bit of movement out of it, which helps for your follow-up shots. Another thing is Glocks and anything modern, pretty much polymer strikers, minus the HK-USP, who has a proprietary type rail, but you can buy an adapter. You can just mount your light directly onto it. The one thing with a striker fire that you have to remember is loaded one in the chamber. They have to sit in some type of holster. They have to have that trigger covered. So what that means is there's only 5.5 to 6.5 pounds force to pull that trigger and set that gun off. So this isn't safe to just set out on a nightstand, because you can inadvertently, in the heat of the moment or as you're grabbing it, set it off. If it's in a drawer, something falls in it, whatever, you push the drawer closed, you'd have a definite high probability of a negligent discharge with it. So striker fire gun positives are the trigger pull is the same every time. It's easy to train somebody with them. They're easy systems to learn. There is no external safeties. There's just a built-in trigger safety and the drop safeties. And Glocks, yes, are safe, even though there's not a mechanical little lever here. You have to make a conscious effort of contacting the safety and pulling the trigger, on the little safety tab there. So these are safe guns. I've carried one for years and years and years and years, and I've never had an ND at this point because I've done everything I'm supposed to. I keep my booger hook off the bang switch, when I'm not supposed to, as they say. So definitely a reliable system. They've proven themselves for years. I am a big fan of Glock. I don't carry a Glock anymore. I do carry the 1911, and it's just a switch that I made. Not that the gun was any that I wasn't comfortable with it, or I didn't like something about it, or I felt it wasn't accurate enough. Anything like that. It's great system. Just wanted to kind of change up, do something different. Because I've carried these for so many years, it was kind of more just being a gun guy. I wanted to try something new. But highly recommend a Glock. Highly recommend a Glock 19. Especially, like I said, if you're in a restricted state, this is 10 rounds. If you buy a Glock 17, it's a bigger gun, and it's a little bit easier to shoot just because of the size, but you're limited, it's 10 rounds. If you're out of state, you're 17 rounds, you're gaining something. You're getting 2 rounds over this gun out of state, because this is a 15-round gun, in an unrestricted state, and 17 on a Glock 17. So there is an advantage to go to a 17 out of state. If you're in a restricted state like California, there's not a lot of advantage, because this can be used as a nightstand gun, it can be used as a carry gun, it can be used as a range gun. A lot of uses for a gun this size. So I wanted to cover that. Like I said, positives, trigger is the same pull every time. No external safeties, nothing to worry about. It's basically, once it's ready to go, all you have to do is consciously pull that trigger and it's going to go off. But you do have to store it in a holster of some sort for it to be safe with one of the chambers. So, something that covers the trigger guard. Another thing I just want to touch on real quick is, if you're in a restricted state and you're limited to 10 rounds, another good option is a Glock 21. This particular one's a Gen 2. It's a lot older version, but the new Gen 3s have the accessory rails like that Glock 19 where you can mount light to it or whatever. This one, is a 13-round capacity, 10 round if you're in a restricted state, but 10 rounds of 45, so you're gaining caliber. You're going up in your caliber size, and you're not really losing anything, because if you're limited to 10, you can have 10.45, you can have 10 9mm. It really doesn't matter. I'm not a real fanboy as far as switching back and forth. What's a better caliber? They both work. It's more in shot placement than it is in caliber. So I'm not saying they all follow the hard ball and all that kind of stuff. 45 does a good job. 9mm does a good job. They'll both do it well. So. Just as an option though, if you are limited 10 rounds, you can have 10 rounds in this. 45, basically 10 plus 1, you have 11. So you're at the same capacity as you would be with a 9mm. Another thing is, it's a big gun, but it's a pretty soft shooting gun. It's one of the softer 45s, shooting 45s I own. Definitely reliable. Same thing, it's striker fired. Same system as the other Glock. Same trigger pull every time. From first shot to last shot, it's the same. No external safeties on the gun, just the trigger safety, which is a safe system. You hear people that harp about that. You do have to actually get your finger in the trigger well and make a conscious effort to squeeze that trigger, squared up on that trigger for it to go off. So another good choice, like I said, you can go 45, and size doesn't matter in a home defense gun, nightstand gun, whatever you want to call it. So this is another good option too. Whatever gen you pick. Gen 3 or Gen 4. Gen 2s aren't available anymore on the market. You have to buy them used. But solid gun. So, and it don't have to be a Glock. It could be a PPQ. It could be a VP9. Whatever, just to cover that system. I'm not here to argue and debate about what gun is better. All modern guns work well now. Just know your gun. Even if you have a high point and you shoot your high point good and your high points prove to be reliable, wouldn't knock you on that. But put the time in to make sure that gun's reliable, before you just basically get it home from the gun shop, load it up, and put it on your nightstand. Test all these. I test everything before I would ever consider a defense gun. Glock right out of the box. I'm not gonna just load that thing up and put it somewhere that I might have to depend my life on it. I'm gonna put rounds to it before I trust my life to it. So just something to think about, guys. Like I said, I just wanted to cover it, kind of continue on with the home defense series. If you do choose a handgun, these are the different systems. Know their pluses, know their minuses, and train with them. Whatever you pick, if it works, and it works for you, and you can shoot it well, it's not a bad choice for you. But you have to put the time in. Like I said, you have to train with it, and you have to deem it reliable for yourself. So I just want to put that out there, guys. Hope this helped you with a choice. And like I said, don't limit it to the brands or whatever I have here. It's not so much, is HK better than Glock? It's not that kind of video. It's just different trigger systems I'm trying to cover, and just get whatever gun you get, shoot it. Have a good time. Make it a monthly thing. One day a month, go out, put 50 rounds to it. It's not that expensive. You can save that by not drinking coffee 2 or 3 days at Starbucks or something if you have that kind of expense. But like I said, put the time in. It's kind of the defense. It may lead to the defense of you or your family one day. So it's worth the time. It's worth the effort, and it's worth the cost. In the long run, should you ever have to use that for a defensive situation. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'll end it here. I hope I didn't bore you too much. Thanks.